headphone.
Yeah, you have a ticket?
Nah, I forgot, man. I'm sorry.
Oh my god.
Jesus.
Well, where are you going?
Boston.
1375. Low to Boston. Here, dick. I could charge you extra.
Graffiti in the morning, the world turning. Brainstorming, for sure, a forewarning. Good morning, I'm sorbing.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Good to see you back here in Boston. Hope the ride in wasn't too bad. This will be episode number 1, and I apologize because I don't really want to go over a 15-20 minute marker, but this one's going to be a little bit long today. And I also want to just give a heads up because this episode is not going to be doom and gloom, but it is going to be talking about some touchy subjects. I personally faced some traumatic experiences, and some of which are death and suicide. So if these are touchy subjects for you, don't worry. Feel free to back out. There's going to be other episodes that aren't, talking about these subjects. But this is something that helped kind of shape who I am currently. And I do want to help others that are in my shoes and are walking down this path and having to deal with something. So I would like to shed some light on it and hopefully help someone out so they don't have to completely go down the path that I did. Now, I'll start off with a quote from Benjamin Franklin that I just came across. It said, "Some people die at 25, but they are not buried until 75. This means basically something inside of you has died. You feel differently, but you're not dead. You're physically still here. You're alive still, especially by medical standards. Heart is pumping, lungs are breathing, brain still is activity, etc. But this remains that way until the age of 75, when Ben says your body breaks down, your organs no longer function, and officially you die. Now, I kind of at first had a hard time understanding that until I experienced what I experienced on April 25th, 2019. And that is a day where I felt like personally I died. Now, the morning of the 25th was like any April day. I woke up, I started to get ready for work, wanted to get everything done for the day ahead of me. I had an evening shift that day at work, and I had a couple things I wanted to get done for my clothing brand. A little after, I want to say 10 o'clock, maybe 11, I received a phone call from my father. Now, it's unusual for me to talk on the phone to my dad. Normally we do that in person, but he called me this morning, and he seemed very sad. And that's not something I'm used to him sounding like, but he just said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that Harry's gone." And I said, "Harry's gone?" Like, very confused. You just trying to digest what he's saying. Like, one, I'm like, who's Harry? Where are they gone? Like, are they going on vacation? Like, where are they going? Seems silly, I know, but that was the first thought I have because I just didn't expect what I would hear next. But my father started to cry, and that's not something I had seen really since, he cut off his finger at his business when I was younger. And he was, screaming, and obviously that was very traumatic. But he stopped, and he just said, my cousin came home, and she had found her husband after he had took his life. And just like that accident, and I remember being there watching my father in the pain he was facing, I once again stood there in shock. I couldn't fathom what he had just said. I froze. I think I dropped to the ground. It felt like someone had taken a knife and just shoved it right in my chest and cut me right down the middle. It honestly was one of the worst pains I'd felt in a while. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that it was the only time, but it's happened at the passing of one of my grandfathers, and even sometimes with some of my friends that have been so close. But it's a horrible feeling to lose someone, especially that impacts your life the way Harry did. And I mean, that was something I never could say to him. I mean, as guys, we're not the ones that are going to share our feelings and tell people that, they mean something to us. But I can tell you honestly that this was something that he should have known. And I should have said to him, you hold some sort of importance in my life, and I appreciate what you are trying to teach me, even though it's not like a direct thing. It's just I'm kind of living by his example and the things he does. It's always horrible, losing someone, like I said, but it's really the biggest impact when it's someone that had some sort of inspiration over your life. Now I want to fast forward. I'll jump to the funeral services. When Harry was buried, I spoke in front of everyone. I wasn't able to tell him this, but I thought at this point, this is the last chance I'll have, and I want people to know this was important, so I wanted to share this. But I talked about how he inspired myself and so many people around him. I went on, and this is going to be kind of like a quote from what I wrote, but I just said, when I was, I believe, about 10 or 12, Brandy brought you over my dad's house, and I remember looking at you, and I thought you were the fucking coolest dude. Like, literally was covered in tattoos, seemed like a real badass dude, like someone that didn't take crap from anyone. And I mean, yeah, that's what face value, Harry was. That's what he looked like, a real badass dude. But the thing was, he was much more than that. And you would only, realize that once you got to know him. And I feel like that's very much something I not only, sympathized with, but I empathized. Like, I could feel that. I felt like people felt the same way about myself. Like, he was judged solely for what people saw of him and not really who he was. But he was one of the best people to be around. Honestly, so enjoyable. He always had these hilarious stories about things, and his laugh is what made these stories just like so much better. Even to this day, I can still hear him laughing, and like I can't even when someone mentions like him and his laugh, I laugh. Like, I can literally hear him. He was a hardworking guy. I mean, he didn't just come home after a tough day at work and come home and chill. He continuously sought out knowledge, and he was always bettering himself. Like, he was learning a new language every time I turned around, Spanish or Italian. And he even talked about trying to like learn Mandarin and I think even Japanese at one point. But these are just, a couple of the things that made him unique. He wasn't just I do one thing and that's it, kind of laid back dude. Like, he had a huge drive to him. And you could see that, especially not only in his work and how he tried to learn, but even like through martial arts and how he trained. It was impressive to like be around someone that had this type of motivation. And that was something as a kid I was very like impressed with. So obviously the hardest part that I faced was trying to accept the fact that someone that I idolized was gone. They were no longer going to be in my life, and I could never say what I wanted to. But like I said, I at least got this out during the service, and I'm glad I did, because both my cousin and his mother seemed to really appreciate the words, and a lot of people did around me. But what was really hard too was the fact that I had these horrible, negative, and very depressive thoughts after he was gone. I really would just dwell on how someone who was so strong, like not only like physically, but mentally and spiritually in a sense too, would take their life. Like, someone that seems so complete, I couldn't fathom that ever occurring. but it really just took me back. He was always someone who's up for a fight and, didn't back down from challenges. So, if I saw that, like I said, I never would expect this. And that's what made it really tough. It's like sitting there and being like, how is this a possibility? And it really, I don't think, made sense until one day I think I was on Facebook, and I saw this picture, and it showed one of the singers from Linkin Park, Chester Bennington. It has Whitney Houston on there, Robin Williams, and Anthony Bourdain, and they're all smiling, but the caption reads, "This is what depression looks like." So all this happiness that you see, this is actually the face of depression, and they're hiding the pain and trauma behind the smile. And I can't tell you, that struck a huge chord with me. I finally was like, wow, I was like that, even touched on some things that I had felt at some point, even though I was depressed. I never let anyone see it, but that it finally made sense. It was like, even though he was such a complete person, it's like that there was something going on mentally that we never could see because everything else was so rounded. He was high functioning, and that's what made it harder to accept. Even his wife was just like, I never saw that. It didn't, appear to me that there was going to be an issue. And it's hard. I know. I've seen it personally at work. To get off topic for a second, I had this gentleman, he came in, I remember one of the days when I was in a hospital, and he was like, listen, I'm not doing so good. I really need to, get checked in. And I was like, oh, of course. I was like, I completely understand. I'm like, that's great that you're, here to take care of yourself. So he checked in, and he got admitted into the psych department. He was doing well. I'd go up there and I'd see him sometimes, and he's like, hey, how are you? And he was just a really great guy, like, similar to my relative. He was a real great guy. And on his end, he knew he had a problem and he was addressing it. So it's like, you're like, wow, this person like knows they have an issue. They're on top of it. Like, what more can you really, ask for in a person? Like, those are really good qualities to have. And unfortunately, there was one day when I was off the unit, and one of the officers was on the unit, and he radioed in that he was just screaming. Actually, I couldn't hear. There was a bunch of commotion, and when I got back up onto the unit, unfortunately, the gentleman that I had met had taken his life as well, and it was one of the hardest things to see. So after that event, that really scarred me in a way that's undescribable, to see someone that it's like you had contact with that could do that to themselves. But what really made it, that much harder was the fact that then I could empathize with my cousin, because I had been in essentially her shoes at that point. I had witnessed the same thing that she had seen, and I can't tell you, like, that literally fucks with you. And if that doesn't, seem like a part of you dies that day, I honestly don't know what will. But for me, that was, like I said, when that all hit the fan, I could literally see it right before my eyes, and it was one of the most hardest things I think I've ever felt and seen all at once. I honestly, I think that, really impacted me in a negative way, unfortunately. And then I kind of became that person who was high functioning, but I was depressed. I couldn't label myself as depressed. I just tried to, keep myself busy, and I would just, say that these realistic thoughts would, come back. But the thing I always struggled with was being a positive person my whole life. Like, I can remember being told I, was negative about things, and I need to stop thinking that way. But I had always made excuses to myself that I was just being realistic. But the thing about being realistic is it's really a shitty place to put yourself in. And I say that because being realistic is trapping yourself in a box and basically admitting defeat, saying, I have no control over my situation. When in fact, looking at that now, I feel like that's just a way of quitting, and saying that I have no choice. Like, this is all I can do. When in retrospect, yes, death, there's nothing you can control about it. Unfortunately, people are going to pass. But how you handle and how you respond to these events, you very much have control over. And that was something at that point in time I couldn't. I just was like, okay, this is how it is. And I allowed it to completely, take control of my mental health. And I just had a very shitty outlook on life and, even what could happen down the road. I mean, I still was having a hard time accepting the fact that, I was a, negative or realistic person. I just was like, nah, I'm like, this is just life. Like, I got to accept it. And yeah, it makes sense. You try to just jump on it and handle it in any way you could. But in all honesty, I refused to accept it, and I didn't take action to help myself out or, make anything better. But one of the worst thoughts that I remember that cycled repeatedly through my head was, how are you going to survive in life if someone who was your idol and someone who was so strong in every single way didn't make it? And I think that's another thing that just like, when you have these thoughts, it just hits you so much harder because you kind of you get stuck there, you dwell on it. And after that day, I realized I really was no longer, mentally attached to my physical being. I pretty much felt like I was on autopilot every day, just, watching myself like it was a third person, game, like a video game. I still woke up every day. I exercised. I continued to try and do MMA training, but I just had a harsh outlook on that. I obviously didn't stop eating or anything, and I went to work, and I tried to have, relationships like normal, but everything just didn't feel normal. I really was in a state of, like I said, feeling very negative and depressed, and just overall my thoughts and outlook about my future were just so horrible. And still at this point, I still couldn't, admit to myself, like, hey, you're being really negative, like, you need to snap out of it. And I just continued to categorize everything as like, oh, this is life, like, it is what it is, I have no control. It hurt less to say so, but in doing so, like I said, I just continued to trap myself in these repetitive thoughts. Every day from, I don't know, just training or just what I felt in pain. And no one would know. I didn't let anyone know I was in the amount of pain I just woke up and, I ached and different things hurt, and I didn't always sleep well, but I didn't want to share it with anyone. I didn't want to burden anyone with that. Another thing is too, I had always had what I like to call now is the Irish temper. We can get very angry. We rage a lot. But when all this happened, I felt like my ability to control my emotions went completely like sideways. Like, there was no ability for me to control things, and I really, really struggled with that. But I wasn't aware of it until someone in my life like pointed it out to me. It was like, listen, this is a problem. Like, it's not just because you are highly competitive, which I am. I hate losing, so I'm highly competitive when it comes to that type of stuff. But just any minute, like, someone would say something and I'd interpret it as like they were taking a personal attack on me, and I would just lash out. I never hurt anyone I loved, thankfully, but it was like, if you did something and you pissed me off, I let you have it. And that's more so if it was someone that like wasn't a part of my everyday life, like a stranger especially. But I really continued down this horrible path, and I am pretty much aware that like it wasn't until I pushed some more people out of my life that meant the world to me that I finally began to realize the destructive path that I was on. This unfortunately was my rock bottom at this point. I literally had nothing more than, meaningless objects and, things that are irrelevant that you can replace. Whereas people, obviously, you can't replace them. And that's what I, surrounded myself with. I was so desperate to be happy that I thought I could just buy my way into happiness, whether that was just, material objects or even food for that matter, because that always was something that I turned to when I was upset. Like, it made me feel better. And I definitely put on, weight because of it. I don't know if I'd say I ate my feelings, but yeah, I mean, I guess you could. It's taking something that's not the best thing, and that's what you're focusing and you're putting all your effort into. So I was spending and basically just completely had horrible habits. I remember there was this one night I woke up and it was like a horrible nightmare. I felt like someone was like trying to kill me, so I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm not going back to sleep. So I ended up heading out and to my living room, and I just opened up my computer and I turned on YouTube. And I remember I was listening to this musician. He's a rapper named NF. And I sort of, after listening to his music, I sat there in reflection for a couple of hours. And I sat down and I just wrote a list of things that I was, I wanted to have control over. So I felt like, the world I was in wasn't totally hopeless. And it was a smart thing. I don't know what drove me to do that, but at this present moment, by sitting myself down and saying, okay, what do I want to have control over, and acknowledge it, and then right next to it, okay, out of these things, what can I actually change, helped me get back to this mindset. And this was only the one positive thing that I can really remember. I'd always say, if you have the ability to take control over something, you shouldn't complain about it. But if you can't control it, then it's completely okay to bitch about it. So, like I said, dealing with death, you don't have control over it. It's okay to bitch about it and say this sucks, and because there's really nothing you can do outside of take care of yourself while you are alive and do everything to the best of your ability to prevent yourself from dying. But in the end of the day, we all are going to die at some point, and that's something you can complain about. But to sit there and complain about, other things, work or school or someone's attitude, it's like you can change the situation you're in. You can escape from that. It might not seem like it's a possibility, but it is a possibility. So once I sat there and I wrote through everything and I remembered that point again, I just realized I was like, I have actually more control over what I perceived my issues to originally be than my mind allowed me to accept at first. Like, it was crazy to think that these positive ideas were in the same brain that these negative thoughts were also coming from. I remember just saying, like, at some point, like, how can you be so back and forth? Like, how can you be so split? And it wasn't until, like I said, when I got to certain points where I realized things, and I'm going to go into these in, more depth in other episodes, but there were certain things that once I opened up and I sat there and I read and I learned and took in more information to help explain the situation that I was going in, it didn't make sense. But to jump back a little bit, I remember the night after I was done with, listening to music and I finished up with writing down the notes that I wanted to take, I somehow ended up on Google, and I was like, Google, why is, Alcohol Anonymous meetings always starting off with, hi, my name is Joe, for example, and I'm an alcoholic? Somehow I got on that topic. And as someone who, studied criminal justice and sociology in college, I can attest, normally labeling in this manner can have a very detrimental and negative effect on that subject being labeled. I mean, especially if it's that label's out for society to use against that specific person as well. Now, I was definitely skeptical. Like I said, it was hard for me to go against something that I learned, but this was trying to see things from a different way and not be so one-track minded. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this out. I was like, let's say this a different way. But I realized at this point, I said, you know what, let me ask myself this very question. I was like, and let me see how I feel. So I said, all right, I am a negative person who hides behind the fact that, I'm just being a realist. And I said it again, and I said it one more time. And by the third time, I literally was like, ugh. I was like, I am that person. I am negative, and I've been hiding behind this, mirror in a sense that, I'm just being realistic. And I was like, literally, oh, fuck that. I was like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that person. That's disgusting. And as soon as I felt that disgust, feeling come over me, I decided, just like that change had to happen. And once I decided, and believe me, like I said, I had to decide this for myself, but it made so much sense now why they use these, labels in AA. You aren't going to really want to change. You're not going to, go along with this, and you're going to want to fight, even if you are, a negative person. If someone tells you, you're like, nah, I don't agree with you, I'm just, a realist, or you're going to fight it. And no matter how hard you try, you're not going to change at all until you say it and speak it into existence and accept this is what you are. Now, I'm going to step back for a second. I'm going to go over just a couple things I originally, wrote down when I was thinking of this episode. Now, I understand that people will change overall for 3 reasons. Now, it's in spite of people that are, non-believers. Maybe they change for someone they love, or they hit rock bottom. But the thing that I want to emphasize is, if you don't hit rock bottom, you can try to make those changes, but it's not going to be as perfect as it would be if you were doing it for yourself, because you want it. This is the most important thing to you. It's one thing to go along because, others would like it, but it's not going to be done perfectly, and it's not going to be done to their level of, their standard, I should say. But when you do it yourself, you're like, I'm really going to make sure that I get this done, and it's going to be done right. Because as they say, if you don't do it yourself, then, who's going to do it for you? And it's not going to get done right. So by labeling it, owning up to it, and saying, oh, this is my problem, I am this problem, it's going to hurt, but it's going to allow you to open up and go, okay, now this is where I step up and I fix this. I myself have loved to have said, oh, I've made changes for people I love, and as much as I busted my ass to make those changes, it's like I feel like I didn't fully invest in it because it wasn't myself asking for this. And it's really hard until you see it yourself, and that's what I had to emphasize about it. Until you label it yourself, it's going to be hard to get to that point. Unfortunately, the best teacher is, pain. Without pain, there would be no suffering. Without suffering, we would never learn from our mistakes. And when you understand these things, you can kind of see that, hey, pain is, as I'm going to refer to it right now, the ultimate mirror for self-reflection. You can choose to look at it, or you can choose to ignore it. But it's staring right back at you. I mean, you can let it ruin you, or you can learn from it. And that's exactly what, like I said, at that present moment, I was like, I decided here, this is what's going to happen. It's for me now. This is on me. I'm not doing it for anyone other than myself, because I actually want this, because I know it's going to make my life better if I can fix this. Now, I won't let, the past and negative thoughts define who I will be in the future. It was another thing that I really just tried to drill into my head. I was like, I'm not going to sit here and make these bullshit excuses. Oh, I can't get this done. I don't have enough time, and I'm so busy with other things. I sat there and I was like, you know what? I get the same fucking 24 hours in a day that LeBron James get. I get the same 24 hours in a day that Bill Gates gets. I get the same 24 hours that, any of these people that are so successful have. So I have the time too. It's just how I use it, and I got to use it effectively. So that was another tough, thing to sit there and tell myself, but it made sense. And I was like, okay, I really got to focus on this. Now, it's also important that I said this to myself. Listen, it's going to be hard when, other people are making excuses not to make them back, but I'm only in control of myself. Like, we get so wrapped up in, they did this to me and this person did that, but you can't control anyone but yourself. And even if you could control them, like I said, it's going to be a temporary thing. It's not going to be like, effective. So once I fully digested these things was when I was fully able to say, okay, this is how I do it. This is how I make the change for myself. But to jump back to my relative for a second, this quote really made a huge mark on my progress and my change over the past year. On Harry's memorial card, I've adapted this quote now into my life. Now, I don't know who came up with it, but I really like it. It's very simple, but it's effective. It says, what the caterpillar perceives is the end. To the butterfly is just the beginning. I'll read that one more time. What the caterpillar perceives is the end. To the butterfly is just the beginning. Meaning, you might look at, just like I said earlier, someone's gone, or some situation is, seems like you have no choice in the matter of it. Just because it seems like the end, yeah, it very much could be. But this is the time for you to sit there and say, okay, how can I start fresh? How can I use this as my new beginning? This is my new life now, like starting over. Just because you have those, just because you died at 25 doesn't mean you have to go all the way up until you're fucking 75 and live some piss poor, miserable life. Like, we have control over this. And this is one of the things that we need to understand. Like, everyone needs to understand. There's going to be shit times. It's not going to be picture perfect. It's not going to be easy every day. But we can always start over. We can start fresh. You have to do it for yourself. I'm not saying everyone else is going to give you, the chances. But you yourself can sit there and go, okay, the old me is dead and gone. They're gone. And this is who I'm going to be from now on. And when I finally reached my point, which happened to be April 25th, 2020, a full year later, after I had been living in death, this was my time to restart. I said to myself, Harry's no longer here. He's not with me physically, but I am. And I decided at this present moment that I will continue this path that he has showed me and others that cared for him. And I'm going to do that by living life to the fullest, whether that means by meditating, by exercising, by traveling, learning, even laughing, and most importantly, always growing. Not just giving up and not just saying that's it, but still making changes. So when, like I said, April 25th, 2020 came, it was clear that I had been dead for over a year. But on this very day, I was born again. And this time, I decided that I was standing in the ashes of my former self. I was no longer who I used to be. I will not let my past, my, experiences define who I am as a person. No one wants to be remembered by the worst thing they've ever done. And I didn't. And at that decided, it felt so good that I was done. It was a fresh start. And that's the point that we need to reach sometimes. Getting to that fresh start. Cleansing yourself of who you used to be. Not allowing anything to continue to bring you down from your past, because you still have time while you're alive. And time is really what I got to impress upon you all is the most important thing. It is something you will never get back. It's not replaceable by material objects or anything else. Once these people are gone, they're gone. So the time with our loved ones, our friends, our family, our children, relationships, these are the most valuable thing. When you look back over your life, you're going to have regrets, but you're not going to regret not getting a job or, not making enough money or, you missed a game. You're going to miss the time that you could have spent with the loved ones in your life. And with that, I'm going to wrap things up here. We doubled the length of the episode I would have liked. Just as a side note, this episode is going to be in dedication to, all my family and friends that I've lost along the way, especially Harry. And as a side note, every intro into these episodes is going to be the intro from his song Vibing. And with that, I want to just say thank you, everyone. I appreciate you listening. And until next time, I hope you all keep vibing.